Fat Puppy here, and today we're going to do something a little different. This has been on my mind to do for a little while, especially since I have not had time to do like real good videos. So I want to do like a whirlwind tour of some of them that I have done in the past, and this is going to be just, look, no notes. This is going to be brief explanations of some of the tombstones and the people buried in the ground that I've done in the past. Now behind me is J Tumey. His family is buried in that crypt. Now, if you're in the local area, Tumey sounds familiar. He was the guy that spearheaded the founding of the Tumey Hospital that was the Sumter Hospital until recent years when it was bought out by a bigger corporation, I guess you could say, of hospitals. Mr. Tumey is the guy that managed to get the money together over a period of years. Part of his estate was left to Sumter to build this hospital. He had a big farm out in the county, which the proceeds from it were supposed to go to the running of the hospital. Anyway, he and his wife are both buried there, along with, I think, his brother and his brother's wife. I had to get on my hands and knees for this one. Miss Alice Poole. Now, that looks like the tombstone of a child. It's a tiny little tombstone, a very humble tombstone. But she was a woman of means. She had money, and she died in her 30s. Died around 1908 or 1909. See, the marker does not even have her birth dates or death dates. She's just very humble from what I can see. However, when she died, so what happened was she died in her 30s. She had cancer. She went to John Hopkins to get surgery, and she died. So she died there. So in her will, she left money for the building of the new Catholic Church. That would be built in 1910. She left money for 3 houses, modest homes to be built for friends of hers. She left money to go to the Tumey Foundation for its hospital, and that's all that she had was buried with. So as humble and unassuming as her little tombstone is right there, is this. A grateful church put this up for her. It was put up in 1917, and I'm gonna read it to you. Erected by the congregation of St. Anne's Church to the grateful memory of Mr. and Mrs. O.C. Holbert, who I think were her grandparents, and Miss Alice Poole, 1917. By the way, she also has a stained glass window in her honor in the church, along with several other people. Here we have almost the opposite situation of Miss Poole. Here we have John Feehan. Oh, yeah. Loving memory of John Feehan. Now, John Feehan was a beer truck driver, except back then they didn't have beer trucks, they had beer wagons. So he drove the wagon, which tells you probably that he wasn't a man of much means, but apparently someone in his family was, because when he died, they buried him here, and they had this big monument built for him and for other members of the family. Now this one I did not do a story on, but I was just here and just happened to see this, thought it was interesting, and I'll get you a little closer to it in my next screenshot. But this is Betty J Hudson, who was born in 1925 and died in 2004. There's a Betty Boop on the tombstone, if I can get my finger in the right direction. And that's what I'm going to show you a picture of. Not a real story here, just an interesting tombstone. There it is. There's Betty Boop. On the bottom, I don't know if you can see it or not, it says, "Our beloved Boop." I also did not do a story on this one. This is Charles Cabala, the resting place, the final resting place. He was a police officer that was killed on line of duty in 1996. Not sure how good you can see them. 40 grave markers of babies, infants. Now, I'm at a cemetery in Sumter called St. Lawrence Cemetery. It's the local Catholic cemetery. I don't think I mentioned that earlier on. And this is not going to be the only place I'm going to be for this video. They're babies, they're infants, and I think 14 of them I counted are, they're just crosses, they have no names. I wonder, and I could be really wrong about this, this cemetery was moved here in 1910 from Liberty Street downtown. They closed that off and made this the new cemetery, St. Lawrence. And I wonder if those were babies that may have been buried in the old cemetery and they just lost track of who their parents were, or if maybe they were orphan children and they didn't know who their parents were. It's really sad either way, but yet they have a place of honor here. This place, this little corner of cemetery is to their honor. Right there, dead center of St. Lawrence Cemetery. Equal steps that way and this way, equal steps that way and that way, is the burial spot for Father Timothy J. Sullivan. It's not his, excuse me, it's not his original space though. It's not where he was originally buried at. He died in 1865, was buried in the old cemetery on Liberty Street, which is now a commercial area. He died in 1865. He was the first full-time paid priest, I guess you could say, of the Catholics in this area. He was the last to be moved from the old cemetery. The stone is written completely in Latin. I was able to transcribe some of it. It basically says that he was a good, holy man out of the Diocese of Charleston. This whole area is the Diocese of Charleston, South Carolina. And just said that he was a humble and a charitable priest, very loving. I'm about to leave this cemetery, the St. Lawrence Catholic Cemetery, and go over to the next cemetery, which is the City Cemetery. It's very neat, or odd, depending on how you look at it. This is the Catholic Cemetery. That way, over across the fence, is a black cemetery. That way, across that fence, is the City Cemetery. Been there since the 1840s. And when you get across the street over there, is the Jewish Cemetery, which I've not been to. Before I leave this cemetery, I'm going to leave you with a story. Someone whose marker I cannot find in the cemetery is that of Lieutenant Raphael Lampre. Lieutenant Raphael Lampre was a Cajun from Louisiana who was in the Civil War. He died in battle just outside of Sumter at the Battle of Dingle's Mill. In this battle, he, without getting a whole lot into the history of the battle, basically overwhelming odds, him and some other Confederate soldiers got shopkeepers, boys, old men together to go fight some Union troops that were coming through to slash and burn, and they were overwhelmed. He told everybody to skedaddle, but he stayed and kept shooting at them until they killed him. He took a shot to the head. The interesting thing about him is he's supposed to be here as far as I know. I say that because the newspapers at the time said that he was buried in the Catholic cemetery. This Catholic cemetery was not here though. The Catholic cemetery at that time was on Liberty Street in town in the commercial district, which wasn't the commercial district then. And it was, the church itself is right across from what is now Simpson's Hardware. They had that whole block. When they bought this land and started moving people, that cemetery to here, they may have missed him because I cannot find a tombstone for him here. And a Confederate tombstone would be very noticeable. It would be a Confederate tombstone. And I just can't find it. This is not a big cemetery. It's not hard to find something here. I wonder if one of two things happened. I wonder if he got missed. I find that hard to believe because the Catholics are very meticulous in their paperwork. Or possibly his family came to get him and take him back home. Given that there was no embalming at that time, I would think that'd be for a terrible, terrible situation. I'd like to dig deeper into this if I can. I don't know if I can because the records I need to look at are actually in Charleston, South Carolina. That's a bit of a ride to make, and I just don't really have that kind of spare time. He may still be buried on Liberty Street. Who knows? I don't.